All right. Hey, everyone. So tonight we are going to talk about, Samantha and I are going to talk about a subject that is really hard for me to research on, talk about, even just really think about. And that is the Judge Rotenburg Center. For those of you who don't know, I've been tweeting about this today. The Judge Rotenburg Center is, I think I had mistweeted. It's a center in Canton, Massachusetts, and it's been around since 1971, I believe. Yes, it used to be called the Behavioral Research Institute. It was founded by a Harvard graduate, Matthew Israel, who is still actually, the head of this institute today. And it's one of the most controversial like living based centers, probably in the entire country, but definitely for people with autism and people with mental disabilities and handicaps. So first, I am just going to play this clip really quick introducing the center, since I know you might not have seen this, Samantha. And this clip that I have is actually from it's from a short video that I watched that was kind of like a mini documentary on the center, but I believe that they stole this clip from actually like a promotional video for the Judge Rotenburg Center. So I'm just going to play this really quick.
Is a special needs school for behavior disordered, emotionally disturbed, and developmentally delayed children, adolescents, and adults. Our youngest is 9. The oldest, I believe, just turned 52.
All right. So they basically, make it sound like there's this great center. I don't know if you could hear that very well. For some reason, it never plays very loud for me on my end. But they use the term mentally deranged. They use a lot of derogatory terminology, even just in their promotional video. And I cut it off right there, but they were about to show kind of an overlay of some of the events that happened at this center. So, Samantha, I'll just let you talk for a second if you have anything kind of that you wanted to say, because I think I know that this was not the first time you've heard about this center. We've talked about it before, but was there anything new for you that kind of come up, or did you have any thoughts before I start?
No, not really any new thoughts, but I just can't believe are they still open?
Yes. So
They
the
are.
Judge Ron is still open, and I'm going to get all the way down to where we are at right now with that, because it's been like an ongoing controversy for literally decades, but they are still open, and there are still people living there that have the graduated electronic decelerator device that they wear. Um, so basically, this center is founded on the idea of ABA therapy. Basically, they use the ABA therapy principles to basically like try to train their residents not to have behaviors that are undesirable. And what's so upsetting is what some of the undesirable behaviors that they consider can be just as little as, not listening when given a directive of what to do, all the way down to something as simple as you'll see a video of a girl at the end. I don't know if I clipped the right part, but basically she says they tell her no manipulation of objects. So she's not supposed to like fiddle with objects. They're not supposed to like flap their hands, because that's seen in ABA therapy as being like a distracting behavior. And they can be punished for that with up to and including graduated electric shocks. And I should have taken better notes, and I wish that I did, on the exact like type of milliampage that they use for these shocks and the voltage and everything. I don't know exactly how they characterize them, but I know that there's been a lot of controversy there. There was at least one person who had basically been sued by the center for saying that the shocks that they deliver are 10 times as strong as like basically, I think they were saying like a taser device that the police use. And they got sued for this because some of their shocks are less, but some were up to like even more. I think it was like 20 times or something when he kind of like went over the data. So there are actually 4 levels of this device. and the fourth level, the highest level device, they actually still use on people today, and it uses electric shock, amplitude, voltage. I forget exactly what terminology that they use, but that is like, it's pretty alarming and very painful and also dangerous. So, like I said, they use applied behavioral analysis. That's ABA therapy. That's the way that they try to train the students and residents that live there. So they have their youngest person, I believe, right now is 7 years old, and they go all the way up to, I think, their oldest person that living there right now is 56 years old. So these people aren't just visitors to the center. It's not just a boarding school. This can be a life path for these people. I did read in one place that it costs $275,000 per year for a person to live at the Judge Rotenburg Center, and this is paid for by taxpayers. And the center boasts all the time that basically they have a 0% rejection rate. So no matter what issues the person has, they're going to allow them at the center and deal with them with up to and including these, high voltage, basically electrical shocks. So what I will say is this center, it had a different name when it was formed. Like I said, it was the Behavioral Research Institute from 1976 to, I think they changed its name in 85. But I'll tell you why. They had a series of controversies there, and there was actually many, many deaths that have happened. And there was at one point a lawsuit against the school in the 80s where they tried to shut it down. And a judge by the name of Judge Rotenburg actually, basically he ruled in favor of the school. And I believe even had the person who was like supposedly like defaming them or whatever pay damages, lawyer fees at least, to the school. And as they were so grateful that they didn't have to close down, I guess I say school, but it could be considered school center. It's like basically a living facility that also has school. They were so grateful that they decided to name the center after that judge. So I'm sure that was a real great person there, Judge Rotenburg. You could have saved a lot of people a lot of harm over the years. But they use all kinds of things. Like they don't just use the graduated electronic decelerator, which was designed by Matthew Israel. Apparently, like in the very early years of the centers, a parent had made something similar, but like it wasn't as powerful, and they brought it and showed him, and he designed like a better one because apparently they tried it on someone and it said, whatever I saw said they shocked the person like thousands of times or something, and the behavior was not modified. So they came up with like a newer version that was more powerful. And then there's like multiple generations. So like the fourth is like the highest one. So they like can, if they are not controlled their behavior with like the first, the second, the third, then they'll move to the fourth. And so some of the things that they can get in trouble for is like if they're not neat, if they wrap their foot around the chair leg, if they stop working for more than 10 seconds when they're doing something, if they close their eyes for more than 5 seconds, minor acts of noncompliance. And this is all just from Wikipedia. Using the bathroom without permission, screaming while being shocked, or not like just totally submitting when being shocked. They'll continue to shock them over and over multiple times. So it's pretty horrific. This device goes like all over the body, and it goes on limbs too. And I believe they can directly shock like a certain part of the body as well. I'll get to the holster device at the end, or the holster program. So other things that they use besides from just electrical shock, they use contingent food programs where they can put these people that live there on food like 20 down to 20% of their caloric daily value, and they'll even sprinkle, I think it was like liver powder or something on it to make it taste worse, and they can be forced to eat that for up to years if they are not compliant. They also use sensory deprivation. There was a time in 1981 when they had somebody who was, in sensory deprivation. They had a helmet on them, and the person actually died of asphyxiation. Movement limitations, so they restrain their residents. And then sometimes they'll even do something as evil as behavioral rehearsal lessons where they'll like elicit a behavior and shock them like in order to teach them, even though the person wasn't necessarily going to do that. They also use reward system as in all ABA therapy. Um, so this place has been looked at multiple times, 1971, 1982. There's been lots of times when they've looked at abuse, excessive bruising, humiliation, use of restraints, they use retaliation. Let me see. They've removed records, denying residents food as punishment, things like that. Okay, so I'm going to talk really quick about the deaths. There have been a lot of deaths. So one that I tweeted about earlier was in 1981, Danny Aswald. He was 14-year-old autistic boy. He got in trouble and they restrained him face down in the bed. And he had had a prior surgical rod implanted and he was not able to breathe. And he had a seizure. Oh, no, sorry, that's a different one. He just wasn't able to breathe and he died. And then the medical examiner had even just ruled this as due to mental retardation and cerebral malformation and natural causes. So all the way back to 1981, we have so much corruption. 1985, that was when there was a person in the sensory deprivation helmet and he asphyxiated after having a seizure. His name was Vincent Militek and he was only 22 years old. He was autistic. 1987, we had Abigail Gibson. She was 29 years old. She had a seizure disorder. They used a lot of adversives on her. She had a heart attack there and then she died like 2 days later. Same thing. There was another girl in the 1990s who was 19 years old. She was nonverbal and she had a ruptured bowel, but she had also been on one of those food deprivation diets, I believe. Yeah. So I'm going to talk now. I'm going to show you guys a video that's like really horrifying. This is Andre McCollins. And I cut it off because there was a lot of screaming and it was just too hard for me to watch. But basically, he was I think he was, I forget exactly how old he was, but this was in 2002. He basically didn't take his jacket off fast enough when they told him to. And so they started with the shocks. They ended up shocking him like 31 times over 7 hours. And they just, he was like intense pain. He was screaming and everything. And then he went like basically like comatose type state for like 3 days after that before they took him to the hospital. There was a lot of controversy around this. He was diagnosed with acute stress disorder, and his mom started a lawsuit, which they didn't release this footage until 2012, but it's pretty disturbing.
A student named Andre McCollins refused to take off his jacket when asked by a staff member. In response, he was tied to a restraint board, known as a 4-point board, face down with a helmet on his head. They kept him there for 7 hours without taking a break. Whenever Andre screamed or tensed up, staff administered an electric shock for a total of 31 times.
Okay, so that was that was Andre, and basically, like I said, he didn't take off his jacket fast enough. This was in 2002, and they shocked him, and this went on for 7 hours, and then he was in a comatose state. He had to go to Children's Hospital, and there was a lot of controversy there, but it didn't actually change anything. This center still does these exact, basically these same practices today. I'll talk in a little bit about how things have changed somewhat and like how they're looking to change. But, this is obviously, it's just a horrific treatment of human beings. It's really hard because I know a lot of people don't, the issue that I have where we look at people advocating for all types of groups of people and everything is that most of the time those people really, really have a voice. So, we can get all excited about something like, as no offense, but petty as like wanting to be transgendered. And then that person's going to go out and advocate for themselves and make it sound like they have a right, and everyone's going to pay attention to them because they can get loud and they're going to advocate for themselves. But the issue that I have, and same thing with really a lot of different things, say even your child got myocarditis from the mRNA shot, you're going to talk on it, that child's going to talk on it. It's like very accessible to a lot of people. But when it comes to people with autism and developmental delays, it's hard because they're a group of people who usually can't advocate for themselves. And the autistic people that aren't this severe are wanting acceptance for themselves so much that they overlook like the other people on this end of the spectrum that are ending up in these like horrible, horrible positions. So it's really hard for me to read this stuff and know that this has just been going on for 40 years. And that, it's not really like people will say like, oh, that's terrible, but there's not really anything necessarily being done with it. So what I was going to say is basically there's been a lot of times when they've tried to stop this. A lot of people, they've done a campaign called Stop the Shock, talking against, the use of this decelerator advice. They call it something else, I think CSS. It's like something skin shock. And basically, it's really hard because there are some parents that want their kids there, or their, even their adult children, whatever, like their children at this center. And I'm assuming it's because they just don't know how to bring them home or what else they would do with them. So sometimes those parents will come out in favor, but if you think about it, like no, like autistic person you would think would really say like, yeah, that this was a great place for me. One thing that they don't do is advocate for the use of psychiatric medications. So a lot of parents say like, oh, my child was so much more alert and interactive and have more personality after being there. But if you think about it, they're still training them basically like an animal, but like with horrible adversities, like you wouldn't even use on your dog necessarily. Like they do make shock collars for dogs, but they're not going to be this strong. And if I sat in my front yard and I shocked my dog 31 times and the dog was screaming and stuff, do you not think like the neighbors would call, do you not think that the police would be like, show up? Do you not think some animal rights group would come try to take the dog away and be like, this woman's literally just what the dog moved one more inch or it panted for a second and she continues to shock it? Like that's like the behavior that this place does like on a regular basis. And there's many, many, many stories about it. So it's very upsetting. And what I will say, moving on. So basically ABAI, that's the International Board for, and Samantha, you might have some notes on this, for basically like ABA therapy and their members there. So BCBAs, sometimes they have BCBAs, and then there's like some under them, there's some that just kind of help. They do like behavior analysts, but they're like more like a lower level degree, and they more administer the therapy that the BCBA is telling them to. I got in a little bit of an argument with somebody on Twitter the other day because they tried to tell me that ABA therapy has ethics that don't allow for the use of punishment except in extreme cases when nothing else is used. And I told them that they still allow for the use of punishment, and they still train children with reward and punishment systems, which doesn't teach the child to use their own brain and to become like a self-advocate and like a full person. Instead, it's basically like abuse and manipulation that you're training a certain behavior with, because that's how they see autism, and that's not what autism is. And we'll talk about that in a minute, wrapping it up. But basically, autism is, people can say it's genetic, they can say it's this, it's that, but basically it is a biological process. Most people with autism are shown to have underlying mitochondrial or metabolic dysfunction. That means that their body doesn't process toxins the same way. They can become nutrient deficient. Lots of times they have brain inflammation. They get accumulations of aluminum in their brains. as shown by some research articles that I have, where they looked at the brains of people with autism and found like an overwhelmingly like alarming amount of aluminum. So what's going on with them is really, really biological. And to think that you're just going to train a person's behavior and that you've somehow done something is like ludicrous, disgusting, and basically it should be considered like malpractice, in my opinion. So what they should be doing is treating the biological process so the body can heal and the person can access use of their brain better. But that's not what they do. They try to train behaviors into literal human beings so that they'll act a way that makes them better and easier to handle for, you know, their parents, the schools, those around them, which is like horrifying. And they'll do everything all the way up to electric shock. And no matter what this person on Twitter tried to tell me, her profession, the BCBA profession, absolutely allows BCBAs to work at Judge Rotenburg Center, as shown by the fact that Judge Rotenburg Center has a literal job listing up right now for $100,000 a year that they want a BCBA a doctorate. And they're trying to hire one. They have multiples that work there. So if this was really unethical by that profession standard, then they would strip those people of their credentials and they wouldn't be able to practice this therapy anymore under that credential, under that licensure, or basically like, yeah, under that credentials. So, and certification, they wouldn't be able to continue to be a certified in their profession, but they are, because they do allow for this. And so ABAI, that I think that was because it's called ABAI, that is the international board, and they had many people reach out to them over the years. They started to look into um, the issues at Judge Rotenburg Center. There's been multiple times when the FDA actually tried to ban it a couple of times throughout the last like 2 decades. And I think most recently in like 2021, they tried to ban the use of the graduated electronic decelerator, but there was some terminology in the laws that it got flipped back and they weren't able to do it. They did impose a ban apparently on the use of it in new patients, I believe. So it's like now all the people that have this contraption, which is only used at Judge Rotenburg Center and nowhere else, I think are like 20s, in their 20s, maybe 29 to 56 years old. I don't think they were necessarily allowed to implement it for younger students, or it had to be a year or something like that. Did you have any information on that, Samantha? Did you read some of that? Okay. But yeah, there's video that I watched of a girl who kind of goes over this in detail, and there's a document that kind of explains it in a little bit more detail. But basically, they've now come out and said like they don't believe that this is a good standard of care. And and a second thing happened where the FDA, a law was changed in 2022, where now the FDA will be able to hopefully ban this use of this device. And apparently, according to this girl's video that I watched, they've actually tried to ban this device and stop the Judge Rotenburg Center from doing this. Basically, every single Congress all the way back to the 80s, and it's just never been able to happen. And that Matthew Israel is still the CEO, of the Judge Rotenburg Center, the person that made this horrible contraption. And, he's a Harvard graduate, so boo on Harvard. But Samantha, did you have anything? I was going to share after this a little video. I have a video of a girl that actually lived there, just kind of telling her story. But did you have anything on the policy wise or anything that we touch on so far?
Like most of my notes was pretty much what you've already covered, which was crazy to me. Like, I didn't really realize, but they use long-term restraints as well. Could you imagine?
Yeah.
And most of the time when they're in restraints, they're prone, meaning they're face down.
Yeah.
They have the skin shock they actually call it contingent shock, I guess, to make it seem.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I read statistically 89% of clinicians that, like, I guess the BCBAs or, the analysts that do this, only 89% are opposed to ECT, which to me that seems still kind of high, but um, only 89% are opposed to it. So there's still like 11% of clinicians that are actually, they think this therapy is therapy. But therapy is supposed to resolve an issue, supposed to help the person get better. These aren't therapies. These are like torture um, policies, torture mechanisms, in my opinion, because there's nothing being done. There's no root cause. It's just about making the life easier for the people around this patient versus the life better for the person that's being like tortured, the one that's suffering in silence. That's just my 2 cents on it, but we can watch the video and then kind of wrap it up with some solutions that we think would help.
Yeah. So this video is a girl who's on TikTok. I forget her name, but basically she was a resident at Judge Rotenburg Center for quite a long time. She apparently plays the piano. You can tell she's obviously on the autism spectrum, but I would say she seems to be pretty high functioning. Wow, I only have 10% battery. I had like 50 when we started. But I'm going to go ahead and play this because she talks about her experience with positive and negative rewards. And basically, like they manipulate her and get her to do stuff, and then they'll punish her if she doesn't do it right. And it's just awful.
Oh, not following directions. Jennifer, there's no this. Jennifer, there's no that. And I was wearing devices on several parts of my body, but she kept shocking me in the same leg. Suddenly, I felt like a searing pain go down my leg and into my foot. And then I just had extreme pins and needles all through my foot. And after that, I had no feeling in my skin on my lower leg or on my foot. Like if I rubbed my hand down my leg, I could see that I was doing it, but I couldn't feel it. And I went to the doctor for another reason, and I told him about my leg, and he said, well, what's this thing on her leg, to the staff? And they said, well, that's a device. She has to wear that. He said, listen, I don't know what this thing is, but it needs to be taken off of her leg. And I wanted to tell him everything so bad, but the staff would report me when we went back, and I would get in trouble and probably not get to see the doctor again like that. So I had to keep it to myself. But now I'm telling you that the devices really hurt me and messed me up. Okay, more later.
I don't think it's an accident that I ended up right.
So sorry, that cut off the front of that story. That was like the aftermath of it. But basically, she had been asked to play the piano at their recital, or like their, it was like their commencement every single year. And she was saying that they would always bribe her. They'd be like, oh, we'll give you like ice cream and attention and do it. And so she would say yes. But she was doing it, and she was with one of, I don't know, it was like a therapist teacher or something like that. They were sitting at the piano, and they had given her a bagel with cream cheese. She dropped some cream cheese and started trying to wipe it away. And they told her no manipulation of objects. And she was like trying to tell them she wasn't. She was like cleaning it up, And they started shocking her and shocking her and shocking her. And that was kind of where the story picked up. So it can be something as simple as that. If they hand flap, things like that, they can get electric shocks that then it's like the person can't explain. They don't stop it. It starts like a whole series. So it's pretty creepy and disgusting. But let's pivot really quick because I pray to God that they will really end this soon, because it's so disgusting and horrifying to think that there's somebody who's 56 years old that's probably lived there their entire life, who's been wearing this freaking shock device, and that the government does nothing about it. But I hope and I pray that this time is going to be the end, where they're going to hopefully stop using it on any of these people, like instead of just phasing it out and thinking like these ones have to live out the rest of their life on it. Like I hope they will end it. But Samantha and I are going to talk now about autism. Like I touched on earlier, it is really a biological the symptoms, the issues that come up from autism are biological. They need to be treated in a biological way so the person's body can heal and that they can use it correctly. It's not, a behavioral non-compliance where they need to be trained. So did you want to talk anything about that? Because actually Samantha was probably one of the first people that talked to me about gluten-free which actually is so important because of inflammation and everything. Do you want to maybe kind of introduce that idea of the gluten?
Yeah, I mean, gluten does increase your intestinal permeability, even people that aren't necessarily celiac. So it's affecting a lot of us. And as much as I hate to limit foods, that's one of them that I would say most Americans need to just cut it out because the inflammation is being seen with some psychosis. There's been a lot of neurological issues associated with gluten sensitivity. Not just you think people that are gluten intolerant are just going to have like diarrhea, constipation, but a lot of these people are being overlooked. Like the mental health aspect, in my opinion, from what I've seen and experienced myself, is the mental health does improve a lot just by cutting gluten out, living a healthy lifestyle. And this is putting the health of the child in the parents' hands. And it does take a large effort. It takes a lot of consistency and dedication to really improve your child's life just by doing a different lifestyle, helping them express themselves or letting them express themselves, however that is. If they have these mood swings or temper tantrums, you would call them, let them have it. Be the calm for them, though. Be the thermostat. Let them kind of say what they need to say or act the way they need to, and then show them some love. And that sounds like I'm sparing the rod and spoiling the child. But when you have a child that has a mental issue pretty severely, a lot of people don't understand because sometimes they don't get to see that part of the child because you're with the child so much. And when you're able to like cut these things out and you see these improvements, that is just part of the journey that is necessary, in my opinion, for a lot of people to see results in their children. And just with like, I was still going over the gluten, and when I say lifestyle, it really affects like your lifestyle as a mother or a parent. It really affects your child, so how you eat, how you think, how you talk to yourself, how you show up every day. They see that, they model the behavior that they see. And if they're just totally in a negative environment all the time, they're not going to get better. They're not going to feel comfortable. It's going to scar them even more than they already are because they can't express themselves already. And some, when severely autistic, they can't express themselves. So you'll just see them scream or hit themselves or have some kind of mood swing and you don't know where it's coming from. But it's very hard for the patient, for the parent to handle that. But at the same time, this barbaric way of doing things is so wrong because it's an easy way out. It's torturous for the patient. And I mean, honestly, I'm kind of like backtracking, but I can't believe that it still is a thing. I can't believe that we still are having to talk about this because look at all the animal testing that gets revoked and the beagles, from Fauci and all that. I mean, why are we doing that? But we're still not advocating it for humans. Like, I just get chills thinking about it. Mental health in America it's only getting worse. And I say mental health, I mean, autism, of course, is skyrocketed, but mental health and neurological issues have too. And it's the way we're living, it's the toxins, it's and it's the approach. These therapies are not therapies at all. But that's just kind of what I wanted to say about gluten and how I feel like it can help so many people. And obviously red dyes and all these things, of course, too. There are articles out there that will show you that gluten is linked to some psychosis episodes, although there aren't a lot of studies done because they don't want the truth to be out, because if it's easy for a parent, if people feel empowered and they see people get better with just natural things and just foods and the way their family comes together versus let's take them to get shocked, or let's medicate them and, drug them out so they're like not themselves. I mean, they want you to choose the one that's going to make money and power for them. So that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I completely agree. And just even think about the price tag of the Judge Rotenburg Center being $275,000 a year, and then taxpayers paying for that. That is not just that costs so much. All the therapies, ABA therapy, speech therapy, occupational therapy, they all cost um, thousands of dollars. Some people have said they've spent $100,000 a year or something insane like that, depending on their state, their coverage, things like that. We have people in America like literally moving states to get more resources, when in reality, do these therapies really work? Are they really necessary? Is that really the way to approach autism? I don't think that it is. I think that autism is definitely, I mean, I know that it is definitely a biological process. A lot of people don't really fully understand that. They think, oh, it's just genetic. My child is this way. We have to retrain them. They think it's very behavioral and like cognitive based, but it's really not. There's stuff happening in the brain, typically a lot of inflammation, causing the person to not be able to utilize their brain correctly or have like overwhelming senses, so like loud is really loud, or things are extremely irritating to them. So like when my son, for instance, was young, before I understood not to give him things that would increase intestinal permeability and deplete him of vitamins and everything, um, he screamed a lot. So he drank a lot of milk, and he obviously had gut pain. He obviously had inflammation like in his brain and everything. He would scream, scream, scream all the time. And it wasn't until I changed his diet to get rid of the gluten and the dairy and like some of the processed foods and everything that he really started to not scream anymore. Um, After that though, he was started to like have compulsive like self-hitting. So that was probably also a frustration and like a pain in the brain and everything. Which seemed like stressful situations would bring it on. So you'd have like that cortisol surge and then, self-hitting behaviors and stuff. That probably took another year, I think, it could have even been a year and a half. I'm thinking maybe it was a year. No, yeah, maybe like a year before that went away. And he doesn't do that anymore. His speaking's gotten so much better. But one thing that I'm gonna say too, he doesn't like mineral water like this. I try to give it to him. It's like too bubbly. But um, vitamins and repleting minerals have seemed to have like a really, really big effect on him. So I cleaned up his diet. It's definitely not perfect because like a lot of people with autism, they get very restrictive. There's certain stuff they won't eat. He's just started like, again, like when he was up to 1 year old, he ate like avocado, ground turkey, like by his hand and everything. But after he was one, after, he had those well child visits and he ended up with autism, which I didn't get him formally diagnosed either, just through the school. But after that, he didn't want to eat anything unless it was like a puff or something. It had to be like very, very like bland food. So he's just now started like licking fruit again and stuff. If I give it to him, he'll like try it and be like, maybe, and eating like watermelon popsicles. And so I try to give him as many vitamins and everything as possible. But mineral repletion, I've noticed a big difference. I buy him an electrolyte drink now at Whole Foods. It has a lot of sugar, of course, but it has minerals, salts, things like that. It's basically like Pedialyte, but it's like a natural version. And I've noticed this in the past, and then I couldn't find it for a while, but I put some in his water, like every single time when he drinks his water. And it just makes a really big difference with his symptoms. Like it's very odd. Like I'll notice like he'll talk better and everything. So it's like there's definitely some deficiencies and everything going on there. And so I always try to look for nutrient ways to help him, biological ways to help him, low stimulation environment, letting him be outside, play, talk, all those different things. And He does so well. I'm very convinced that this is the route to go if you have a child with autism. And basically, I didn't spend any money either, like as opposed to these parents that are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars, their child's stressed out. The therapists are like trying to work with them, but the kid's like not in it because they're too stressed out and things like that. Um, this is just such an alternative. So we do like basically like he does watch DVDs now, but I don't do iPad at our house. He plays outside, he plays with the dogs. I teach him how to do stuff like, sometimes you have to use a little bit of like not just explaining but showing. I mean, just like any kid, but I try to teach him as much like any kid as possible, to do things for himself, to do things hands on. And like I said, vitamins, minerals, diet without, inflammatory foods. I don't give him any more of the V products. I don't know if I can talk about that on YouTube. But all of those things have helped him heal so much. And I do want to say there is an alternative to the Judge Rotenburg style, residential place, I guess. Basically, some people with autism, like they might grow up and they're never fully independent, even if they are pretty high functioning. So parents think like, where will they live? The best thing that I found so far is these like farm style living environments that they have. People with autism can be really, really good at working with animals, at gardening, at doing farm chores because they're like really low stimulation, like lots of this stuff by hand and everything. Living in that low pace environment is so good for them and they can really do the jobs well. So that is such a cool alternative. And something that I like to look out for the future is like, is this an option for a lot of these people as they grow up? Like, where will they live? You obviously don't want them to live at somewhere like the Judge Rotenburg Center. So, developing like those farm style communities. But that was most of what I had to say on that. I don't think I had anything else about the biological side. I mean, I could go into that forever, but I just wanted to really quickly touch on it.
Yeah, and I was thinking, I didn't really look into it, but are there other centers like this in North America that you know of?
It's the only center that uses the shock. It's the only place in America that uses that shock device. They designed it and they're the only ones that use it. I don't think another place could pop up and even ask to use it, like the way that they have the laws right now. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think it's like isolated and they deal with it. The last thing that I was going to say is that mitochondrial dysfunction, exercise is a really good treatment for that too. So a lot of people with autism, almost all of them have mitochondrial dysfunction, and looking at exercise and getting them enough exercise will actually help to improve the function of the mitochondria, which would alleviate a lot of their symptoms. So making sure that they're getting plenty of exercise, running around as kids, as soon as possible, I would get them involved in like a more structured exercise program. Um, Personally, I would say that part is probably kind of genetic. Obviously, like I don't have autism or Asperger's or anything, but I do think I have that genetic susceptibility to like toxins, to damage, to being kind of like a highly vulnerable person. And I will say, like, mood wise and stress wise and like coping mechanism wise, like the exercise really does do something to my system. And I've noticed that for years. So I would say that it obviously benefits anyone, but especially people with kind of that underlying mitochondrial issue.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's about it. But I was going to kind of mention too, I think they probably lobby a lot for the government or education. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking they probably have some kind of deep connection. That's why they're able to stay.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
They do lobby a ton. You're absolutely correct. I think they always show up, they lobby. They've been able to quash so many things. They must have a lot of money, where it's like they've come up so many times where they've like crushed the lawsuit against them or found like a loophole or,
yeah.
yeah, they definitely, and they do lobby to continue.
Yeah.
That's pretty-
Well, I think, yeah, we left with some solutions. That's our main goal, is to expose the truth, but also leave you with solutions for you and your family or someone you know. So if you know someone with autism or any kind of neurological inflammation, just share this video with them, and it can really change someone's life. So
Yeah, or send them away. Or if you are the parent of a child that has autism or is on the spectrum and you want to learn about true health for your family, so that you can not just like, oh, my child's going to eat gluten free while I eat whatever, and you want to really understand that herbalism, getting off of medications, really taking control of your health, then definitely I would say reach out and join the reset. Our program's only 6 weeks long. It starts in July, the next session. We start them every 2 months. But basically, we just teach you how to overhaul your life and live holistically. So, learning how to work out correctly, learning how to move your body, learning herbalism for when issues come up, learning healing nutrition. So, like the type of eating that's going to heal your body, how much to eat. How do I know how much I need to eat so that I lose weight or don't gain weight or gain muscle? So it's all of those things all in one. It's a program that Samantha and I designed. Samantha is a registered nurse. I used to practice medicine as a physician assistant. We both worked ICU, and we both came to the realization that the true healing happens in your lifestyle, not in the doctor's office. And we are just really, really passionate about sharing that with others, because we've both been able to take control of our health and our family's health through the methods that we share. So, Samantha, do you want to tell them really quick where to find you before we wrap up?
yeah, just find me on Twitter at Quantum R Revival, and on Instagram it's the Quantum underscore Revival.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone so much who tuned in. I'm going to save this to my channel, and I hope that you learned something from this. And I hope and pray, if you do nothing else, please just say a prayer that they stop using this device and stop shocking the autistic people that live at Judge Rotenburg Center. All right, Samantha, thank you. And thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and we will be back soon.